Hello and welcome to another edition of the Canadian Premier League Newsroom podcast. I am Kristian Jack. Today I'm joined by Marty Thompson and Charlie O'Connor Clarke to recap one of the best days in league history in terms of storylines, but not exactly if you're a fan of Halifax Cavalry or Pacific. But stay with us. We will recap your team and maybe their demise on Saturday could be influential in their season as well. Results from Super Saturday were Forge 4, Halifax Wanderers 1, Cavalry 2, Valour 4. That's right, 2-4, not a scoreline you get very often in any league. And Pacific 1, York United 2. 14 goals from 3 matches, some brilliant ones at that, some controversial ones. Good morning, fellas. Can you pick a favorite goal from the weekend? There were some dramatic ones. I was going to throw one out there, but I don't want to steal your thunder. Charlie, you got one, a favorite goal?
I think for me, it's definitely Sebastian Costello. 10 seconds off the bench.
Yes.
His first touch of the game for his first professional goal. It doesn't get much cooler than that, to be honest.
It doesn't get much cooler, and great to see Forge social media post that great video as well, where he just kept the ISO cam on him as he ran on the pitch.
Yeah.
I was in the press box at the time, and we were all wondering whether they were going to get to 100 goals in the Canadian Premier League. And we're also going to wonder whether Navarro was going to get a hat-trick. No hat-trick ever for Forge, by the way. Yep. They've never had a hat-trick. And what happens? He gets taken off, and in the very spot that he was about to play in, he was walking behind the goal as it goes in. So, yeah, great shout for that, and congratulations to Forge on the century. Marty, your favorite goal of the weekend?
I think I have to take Lowell Wright. What a turn, what a hit. That was a beautiful shot, and there were some great angles there from Starlight Stadium. I think I'm going to take that one.
Yeah, it's a good one too. As I said, many choices. Schwannier's blast was a terrific goal as well.
Alex Marshall as well had a decent
Marshall,
one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with Alleman just because it was one of those goals that just sat up perfectly, and he also just had that swagger where it just went in. And it was like, yeah, I can score goals like that. It was a 4-2 goal in the 94th minute, and he had no interest in celebrating. He's just, it was awesome. I loved it. Here we are, and now with very little games left. Pacific top of the league. 45 points from 27. Here come Forge, one back with 3 games in hand, 44 points from 24. Cavalry, 44 points from 26. They have all clinched. The race for 4th is fascinating. York in pole position, 36 points from 26. Valour, 2 points back with 21 games to play, 27 games played, 34 points. And the same for Halifax, 27 games played, 34 points as well. We'll get into all the ramifications and what's to come, but we must start out west. We'll work our way back to front this week in a game that had a remarkable number of storylines, but the biggest one was probably the result itself in terms of playoff implications. Pacific 1, York United 2. Where do we start here, gentlemen? Maybe we start with this. We can maybe get into the referee in a second, but what about Pacific? They played games in June, July, August, and September this year and lost 4 games across 4 months. And then in October, they lost 4 games in the month of October itself. Is this a concern, Mr. Pacific himself, Marty Thompson? Are you worried?
What did I say last week or 2 weeks ago? Pacific's just going to be doing Pacific. Maybe Pacific's now just about losing games. I think it has to be considered a concern. I know we're going to get into the potential suspensions and the players they are going to be losing over the next couple of games and going into the playoffs. But man, just something about that match just gave you kind of a queasy feeling. Maybe it was the referee, I don't know, but there was something about it from a Pacific point of view. And I'm sure we're going to have Pacific fans commenting on this, that it just didn't quite sit right, especially in the second half.
No, and it's interesting that Palmer Ducart took that line as well, right? He could have had a number of different things to say about the referee decisions, but in the end, didn't seem like he was giving his team any path in terms of giving a pass in all of this. It was like, no, we decide our own destiny here. Conceding goals when they're leading the game, ultimately, that is not a good thing, right? Charlie, they conceded, I think now 6 of the last 8, they've conceded at least 2 goals in a game. You don't win many games if you concede 2.
Yeah, well, this is maybe the duality of Pacific, because in this match week, you remember they dismantled Edmonton 5-1 just a few days ago, right? And that's one of the most complete games I think we've ever seen from a CPL team. And then they come out against York in another massive game for them, their last home game of the regular season. And it just wasn't there. It wasn't there to the same extent that it was on Tuesday. And, I think Pamadou Ka hinted a little bit in the post-match press conference that, it's possible that they have an eye on Wednesday, that Canadian Championship tie with TFC. But again, you can't. He doesn't want to give them excuses, right? They were outplayed by York, especially in the second half in this game. In many senses, after York made their changes, and I'm sure we'll talk about York in a minute. But Pacific they're a strange team. Like they some nights they look like the best team in the league, and some nights they just don't necessarily have it to that extent, and I'm not sure necessarily why that is.
Yeah, and you mentioned it. He did say that they didn't pre-match. He did tell us on One Soccer they didn't want to keep thinking about TFC one game at a time. But his lineup dictated that. No, I mean, no Diaz, no Chung. There was a few things there you could see that they're looking forward this weekend. Campbell is suspended for the TFC game. He played through the middle. Don't think that's his best position, by the way. But that's, for me, they miss Diaz in that position a lot. But let's get into it, because despite them not playing at their best, they were still winning 1-0 in what was a clear penalty in the first half that for some reason Lukas MacNaughton took, and then they went and scored a goal again with Campbell getting a goal. Then they could have been up by 2-0. Again, another penalty. Again, Campagna on the box on Josh Hurd, but they didn't get that call. And I think if they did get that call, I'm pretty sure MacNaughton wouldn't have been given the ball, and I'm pretty sure a guy called Bustos or Campbell would have took the penalty, and they haven't missed this season. So is it pretty simple to say, Marty, that this game did turn on referee decisions, and we could easily have been talking about a Pacific victory here, despite them not playing at their best?
Yes, and perhaps more than just this game has turned because of these referee decisions. I know you just kind of touched on it there, but obviously MacNaughton, from a certain angle, looked like he was attempting to do the 150-meter hurdles, just trying to jump 2 defenders and went down, and obviously getting that yellow card for simulation, and now out for the semifinals, the 2-match suspension. That's going to be massive. These points dropped potentially, again, that could change Pacific FC's season. We're going to get a little bit into what the standings look like right now, but man, it's more than just that game, considering the magnitude of it. The fact that, again, MacNaughton laying on the ground, given a yellow card, he knows what that means, and he absolutely freaked out, and of course he should have. More than just that game it affected.
Were you surprised MacNaughton took the ball for the penalty? I was staggered.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like so was Pa.
Yeah.
As Ka said in his post-match comments as well, like there are 3 penalty takers on the pitch for that team, and none of them were Lukas MacNaughton. So he was basically saying, I don't know why none of those 3 wanted to step up. We could, speculate probably pretty easily on who they are, but it was very surprising, and just kind of in all, it's a very frustrating day for Lukas MacNaughton, who's been one of the best defenders in the league this year.
Yeah, crucial moment, right? I mean, we've seen it many times around the world. I've seen the best, you name the best managers in the world. Sometimes they get asked this question. Sometimes players go rogue, and then they say, look, I have clear penalty takers. I need the leadership on the pitch. And these moments need to happen sometimes for them to say, look, this cannot happen again. I don't expect Pamadou Ka, with all the things he's got to build up to on Saturday, to say, do not take a penalty, Lukas MacNaughton. You know what I mean? But I'm pretty sure. I mean, if you watch the replay, we saw different angles. York actually put out a shot of their own video that you could see Marco Bustos wants the ball. Like, he's talking to him, and he wants the ball, and then suddenly somebody says something or somebody breaks rank and MacNaughton takes it. I was really surprised, guys. Really surprised. They were 100% from the spot this season. Terran Campbell's taken penalties. Bustos has taken penalties. Like you said, there was another one there, probably Bassett, who could probably have taken one ahead of him.
I think Hurd might have taken a penalty at some point.
Yeah, so there you go. So there's a lot of guys there who could have taken the penalty ahead of him. In the end, though, they didn't score, but they still took the lead. We're going to get to York in a second, because I know a lot of people on social media were saying we buried the lead on the post-game show on the weekend, but the lead was the fact that the league leaders gave up the lead here and lost the game with these referee decisions. The MacNaughton suspension, before we get to York, is unfortunate, is it not? I mean, ultimately in the rules, the reading of the rules are pretty clear. And I can pull it up if you need me to read it, and maybe I'll find it in a second. But it does say that it continues into games other than the championship match. But we need to clarify something here, that we've never had this playoff system before, where we've had other than a championship match, right? So it feels like it's something that can be changed and potentially should be changed going forward after this year, Marty, because nobody wants to see a player miss a game for yellow card accumulation in the regular season over 27, 28 games on a season defining match in a semifinal.
Patiently waiting for the disciplinary report to come from Canada Soccer in my email inbox, hopefully today. Just waiting to see. But
yeah, I think it's. I've got something here. I think it's definitely.
Yeah, I think it's come down. Okay, maybe.
Down, yeah.
I mean, you got the email. I didn't. That's okay.
I'll have a look right now. No, I'm looking at the ruling right now first. Carry on.
But yeah, I mean, just quickly on MacNaughton, like, yeah, how that game turned on him, right? I mean, you could say, why did he take the ball? But at the same time, like, this is very much his team as much as it is Marco Bustos, right? He leads the team in minutes played. This back line is his. He's been here for 3 years. Like, he's grown into this. Yeah. He's grown into PFC shirt so well. And it's like, it's just so disappointing because I know you touched on the broadcast, KJ. Like, he would be like a top 5 player in this league that you would want to have for an important game. Like, he's just been that consistent. He's been that good. It's just so disappointing for him considering the context.
Yeah, I feel for him, no doubt. The ruling is matches exempt from an automatic period of suspension arising from an accumulation of cautions. The following matches shall be exempt from an automatic period of suspension arising from an accumulation of cautions by players under paragraph 7A. Number 1, the final round of the Canadian Championship. Number 2, the championship match/matches of the CPL. So a championship matches, but it's still not a championship match because it's the semi-final. So that's why he will be officially suspended for that game. York. Now, we said last week, we read out some stats about 3 wins in 14, 3 losses in 17. What stat tells us the most about them? Their answer was clear. The answer is 3 losses in 17, a resilient, tough bunch that I don't think played that well in the second half, despite coming back in the game. They couldn't continue they couldn't maintain possession. They couldn't string 4 or 5 passes together. They'll admit that it wasn't that kind of game. It was a game that was very up and down. It was I thought it was quite a disruptive game of football. There wasn't a lot of fluidity to it, but they found a way to win a match they needed to win. And this is something about them, Charlie, that we have to say is a real symbolic moment that this team is a together team that finds ways to stay in games, and they're resilient and they're tough.
It's absolutely that. It's always about responses, right? They played in Ottawa last weekend, looked really bad for the most part, but still managed to get a bit of a result there. They come into Pacific here against the league leaders, and again, they responded. Even if they aren't playing at the top of their game, they absolutely have another gear that we've seen from them this year, but they still found a massive result that arguably might end up being one of the most important results of their season,
right?
As we head down a stretch here. But yeah, they really did show that resiliency, and I think that's what Jimmy Brennan was kind of highlighting after the game. That's really what it is from this team. They are a team that has traditionally been able to stay in the fight late in games. They've conceded first quite a few times, which is a concern of itself. But on the other side of that, they come back quite a lot. They get back into games, and that's the reason that they're still in this playoff hunt and arguably in pole position for it.
You mentioned pole position. To come for them, Forge at home November 6th this Saturday, win and they're in. Forge at home November 9th the following Wednesday. Simple. 2 points from 2 and they are in, Marty. This is working out pretty well for them right now because it's also, we're going to get to this later, but it's also looking more and more likely that Forge will play at home as number 1 seed. And I think if you're York, you'd rather have them. No, you don't have to travel. You've been there. You've won them. You beat them already there. You don't fear them. Don't want to put the cart before the horse here, but this is all coming up York right now.
York, it's all coming up Millhouse. York has played quite well against Forge over the balance of the season, and you're going to have 2 games against them going into the playoffs. I think that actually does value York quite a bit. Like, again, you have these 2 games back to back to close the season, and then whether it's down to Tim Hortons Field, they don't really seem to care, right? You think about that win that they had. I think that was in August, where I think Forge had something like 20 shots, and they just failed to score. Babuli had a bunch of clear-cut chances, and York just walked away with the 3 points. And
I was at that game. Rivera got sent off too.
That's right. Yeah, they were giddy, like they were happy. So yeah, I mean, if you can channel that energy, I don't know. It's not as straightforward as you think.
And just if you're Forge here in these last 2 games against York, you don't want to play them in that playoff game, right? No, if you're Forge, you would much rather play Halifax or Valour at the moment. Yep. So these are going to be quite interesting games.
What about Lowell Wright, guys? Because this is a guy that obviously gets the headlines. He's in the Gatorade Team of the Week for a reason this week. 18 years old, right? Like, you know, it's still a young pup, but scores a goal of immense quality in our league. The way he rolled the ball over his foot and then was able to put it in the corner. You know, I think they've actually done quite well in managing this player. I think he played too many minutes in the bubble when they didn't really have other people. But I was just looking there. He started 2 of their last 18 games. That's it, outside the bubble. Played significant minutes off on when he comes into the pitch. And I bring that up first, Marty, because it's not easy for substitutes at any level to come on and make a difference. But this is a player that we saw last week in Ottawa come on and smash the bar, comes on right away, sets up the first goal, scores the second goal. And for a young player to come in and get right into the game shows a lot about where he's at mentally and really, again, beyond his years.
You're bang on. Just the maturity from the first moments he had with this team, even in 2020, right? He youngest goal scorer in the league when he converted the Island Games. It's been there from day one. That's why, I mean, he has to be considered a top prospect in this league. He has to be considered to be one of these players that's again, players that people talk about him all the time. Like he's a special player, and he might be the next one to move on, right? It's totally in the cards for Lowell right now.
Yeah. Charlie, what impressed you the most about him this weekend?
Yeah, I think you guys kind of nailed it. It's just the ability to make an impact off the bench so quickly is a rare thing in players, especially in players that young. And it's just really remarkable. I know we've spoken about this York team building an identity this year, right? I think we've spoken earlier about their squad rotation and how they set things up. And it seems like Lowell Wright has really embraced this role of being the impact sub, being the guy that they turn to when they need a goal late in the game or they need some extra energy. You know, Julian Ulbricht is maybe the one that starts, and he's quite durable in the first half, and he can do lots of good stuff with his hold-up play. And then Lowell Wright comes in, smash and grab in the box, create some chaos sometimes,
no kidding.
As Jimmy Brennan likes to explain sometimes. And it's really, I think, KJ, you kind of were bang on there with they've managed this player well in the late stages, because there are York players who are clearly getting quite exhausted and have looked a lot more fatigued in the last few weeks than they did in say August, when this York team was really starting to rise. So I think just having a player like Lowell Wright, who still has a little bit of that edge, who, you know, is a little bit fresher than some of the other ones, is going to be extremely valuable for this team.
Yeah, final point on York. They've lost 6 games all year from 26 games. You know, for a team that has invested incredibly in youth and for doing it that way, 6 games, that's it. Pacific have lost more, Forge have lost more, everybody's lost more apart from Cavalry, who've also lost 6. And think about how differently Cavalry have adapted their squad and assembled their squad to York. So every credit. Talking of Cavalry, what a mad game this was. We had the orange ball, we had the snow, we had 6 goals, we had missed penalties. At some point from the far camera angle, it looked like they were kicking a pumpkin around, which was very symbolic.
Made sense.
Yeah, for the weekend that was. Marty, it was your game, and what a gift this was to you on the weekend of great football.
And we have to mention all of the Tommy Wheeldon Juniors in the stands.
Yes,
there were like a dozen Tommy Wheeldon Juniors, and they were all fantastic. This is a great Halloween tradition I want to see in Calgary. They were all good. They were all bunched together. Tommy, to his credit, was going around there waving. I'd like to see them all line up at halftime and do like find a winner. Find who was most accurate. But yeah, I mean, from those opening moments of seeing those Tommy Wheeldon Juniors in the stands to when the orange ball was finally kicked, this game, as you mentioned, was absolutely mad. You talk about that first 15 minutes or so. Tried to recap it on the website as best I could, but if anyone hadn't seen, you know, Moses Dyer and William Akio for Valour hit almost the same part of the crossbar. The ball flies back out, come down, penalty, saved. Joe Mason misses again at Spruce Meadows, comes back again, Dyer scores, goes back the other way, and then Camargo scores. And that was, again, all within the first about like 15 minutes, within like 8 minutes or so. It was absolutely wild. And then, of course, the scoreline ends 4-2 for Valour, which Cavalry's never given up 4 goals in any game in the CPL. So that was just quite a mark from a team that, I mean, we should also mention that's lost this team 8-0 before. So a massive, sorry, Valour fans, I had to put that one in for you. Just a wild performance. And I mean, we haven't even mentioned what this means for the playoff push, right? They're back in the 4th spot. York took their spot, obviously, with their win, but a massive result for Phil Dos Santos.
Just a brilliant game of football for any neutral to watch. Yeah. You mentioned Cavalry's history, not conceding 4 goals ever in a game. They'd never conceded 3 at home. So now they've conceded 4 in a game. Also, what about Valour? First time they've ever won back-to-back games home and away in the Canadian Premier League since they started there as well. Back to you, Marty, on this. You had the pleasure of doing it and talking to both coaches after. What did you get from that? What was the summary of, I'm sure, an exuberant Phil Dos Santos, and I would imagine a pretty dejected Tommy Wilden Jr.?
We'll talk with Tommy. We'll start with Tommy. I don't know which Tommy it was. It looked like the real one. I couldn't tell. I should have asked. I should ask for his ID or something. He didn't seem as dejected as you would think, KJ, to be honest. And I think that really stems back to that opening half and how many chances there were. And he talked about this Fab Four in attack, which I thought was an apt nickname for Ben Fisk, Camargo, obviously Mason and Mo Farsi, who had a great game. They had a great game going forward. They generated lots of opportunities, but they probably should have scored more than 2 goals at halftime. And then in the second half, I mean, it was just William Akio. Like, we have to talk about his performance, obviously, with these 2 goals, but against the run of play, Valour only had 4 shots on target, all 4 goals. Like, he was just clinical and was playing with the utmost confidence, which ended up undoing them. From Phil and from Valour, it was, they both sat down on the podium and just let out a big sigh.
Yeah.
which meant a lot. Like, it's talked about the emotion of the game, and the emotion of getting a result like this, back-to-back wins, as you mentioned. Like, this put them in the playoff places. And I, like, as much as York is in the driver's seat for this, it's still very much on for Valour. And, like, again, Phil was ecstatic as he can be. And they move on to a massive game against Edmonton on Saturday.
Every credit to Valour. It was a must-win. And by the way, it happened before the York game. So that put them into that position for a little bit as well. Then obviously York went and delivered it was almost like that, battle between them. Okay, we'll see what you can do. We'll go again. I'm going to get a little bit more into Valour in a second. But Charlie, let me ask you this. I feel like Cavalry, every time we watch them, their expected goals is higher than their actual goals.
Yes.
That's always fair, right? That's a fair thing to say. What about this? And this may not be fair, but are they now easier to play against than they were when I thought they were more of a nastier bunch in 2019, right? And I think of like DKR falling down and trying to get that foul in the build-up to the Akio second goal. Yeah. David Norman Jr., who's had a wonderful season, but didn't clear the ball as he should have done for Akio to score that. Both Akio goals are great, and Akio, again, Gatorade Team of the Week player, Player of the Month contender at a great time. But if you're Cavalry, you handed those goals to them in a way, right? I think there's something to be said about them being a bit more diligent, a bit more nastier. Is that fair?
Yeah, Cavalry seemed to maybe struggle a little bit with some of Valour's more direct play, right? They were able to, or Valour were able to get through them with these balls, play these balls through, and just run past defenders, which is never really what you want, especially from a Cavalry team who has traditionally, as you said, run into players and knocked them over and been really mean. Cavalry haven't been pressing as high this season as they did in other years, and that's partly just because it's a full season, there's lots of games, and it's really hard to do that consistently. But I'm still surprised that we haven't seen them just try and get at teams defensively a little bit more often. They are giving more space than they have traditionally, and I'm not really sure why, because I know that this Cavalry team still has a bite to it occasionally, and there have been games where they just are miserable to play against, right? And even Joji Kiara is usually probably one of the most frustrating players in a CPL to play against, because he is a guy that will take your ankles out if he needs to. But it's interesting. I'm really not sure what's going on with this Cavalry team, because we've been saying that they're inefficient with the ball for a few weeks now, and I don't think that's necessarily changed yet. And yeah, I think there is a little bit of that bite that hasn't quite been there in some of the past few games.
I think Klomp was missed, no doubt about that suspension. Yes, obviously, a huge loss at the back is just that leader. And my word, who takes their next penalty if they get one? Because 0 for 3 now.
Marco Carducci?
I was thinking David Norman Jr. might be a good one. He can strike a great ball from a free kick. So
that's actually a great idea.
Give him a shout.
Let's do it.
And if you're goal scorer like Mason, that's the worst one, right? You miss one penalty, you're like, okay, give me another one. You want to get your stats, you want to get your goals, you miss another, and suddenly people start doubting whether you can he even step up for the next one? Do you even give it to him now? Talking to goal scorers, one word on William Akio before we move on to the next game. This Valour team, I feel like I want to give Phil Dos Santos a ton of credit because he's obviously turned them around in terms of the results. But I do want to say that I think that there's been more players available to him than there were before. There's been a lot more time off in between games a little bit to help them. And I bring that up as a compliment to William Akio because they've been able to play him every game. Now, in the first 18 games of the season under Rob Gale, he started 10 matches, and the games come thick and fast. We all know we were working them. Games every 3 or 4 days. You couldn't do that. You had to force the rotation. But William Akio has played every game from the start under Phil Dos Santos. And boy, oh boy, Marty's been probably, and there's been others, Gallardo, Galan, there's been Fordyce there's been a lot of players that have flourished under him, but he's probably been the big winner of the coaching change here.
Yeah, I actually asked Phil about that before this game because it really has been, he's been playing with a ton of confidence as is Gallardo, but he just talked about how he's a consummate professional, like considering his age. And people who've checked out his YouTube channel obviously know he is a professional. Shout out to his rabid following on YouTube. Check it out if you haven't already. He just does cut as a mature player. We should mention that he scored those 2 goals yesterday in front of 40 members of his family and friends in the stands. Also Victor Latoria's brother, obviously for Cavalry. Just cuts as mature and just, again, playing with so much confidence. And he mentioned even after the game, he's like, with this new coach, he's like, we all feel reborn. And they're playing like that.
That's very fair. Yeah, you can see it. Must win this weekend for Valour at Edmonton. May well be done before they kick a ball, depending on if York can win the game as well. But what if they aren't done? And I remember this, the first tiebreaker in the head-to-head battles is wins, and Valour have that in spades over the two. Valour currently 10 wins, York on 8, Halifax on 8 as well. So Valour, if they're able to win that game, they will get to 11 wins, a number that neither York or certainly Halifax can even get close to. So win that game, get to 37 on 11 wins. What are you doing? You're forcing York to have to get to 38.
It's not that straightforward, everyone.
It's not that straightforward. So if York somehow lose this game against Forge this weekend, they would have to win the last game to beat Valour if Valour win. Lots of ifs and buts there, but I think it was pretty obvious in terms of how things are going. A dart's throw of making the playoffs is now Halifax Wanderers, who many people thought had a pole position on it just less than a week ago, but just a dreadful week for them. First of all, destroyed and dismantled by a Valour team that could have scored more goals midweek than they did in the 3-0 win over them. And then, boy, oh boy, Charlie, your game on the weekend, and I was there. They were all over the place at least for the first half an hour, and a Forge team that had 3 goals inside 25 minutes and probably could have had 2 or 3 more. It was that one-sided. It could have been 5 or 6, Charlie. Forge were brilliant, but Halifax all over the place in that first half an hour.
Yeah, Halifax is definitely where we have to start. I don't know if we're quite eulogizing them here, but these last 2 games have been really, really bad. Like they have not looked like a team in a playoff race, or certainly not a team that wants to be in a playoff race, because they have just been too easy to play against. Certainly Forge did not have trouble playing passes through their lines. Just Halifax seemed a step behind. They were slower than Forge. They gave way too much space in defending. They allowed players to get lost. Joshua Navarro managed to get completely free in the box for both of his early goals, and I don't know where the defenders were. This is a really, really troubling thing for Halifax, and Stephen Hart certainly seemed exhausted after the game by just, this has to be frustrating to watch as a coach, right? After your team has been so difficult to beat all year, when it's come down to it in these games that they really need results, they have not been difficult to beat, right?
No. Pushovers, really. There was a moment after the 3-0 goal went in where they almost officially called a timeout, where they got in a huddle. As Forge just celebrated Marty at that point, making it 3-0. And at that point, as a team who, by the way, they'd scored 1 goal in 5 matches leading into that, and it was an own goal. At that point, you've lost the game, right? They know they've lost, no matter what they can do. Every credit, they made some tactical changes in the second half. They made 3 changes at halftime, and it got better, although Forge certainly came down a few gears to help them as well, Marty. But to see that, I guess it was really a moment there where they just had to say, guys, what are we standing here for? What do we have to believe in ourselves and represent this team in a better fashion?
Yeah, it really was that first like 20 minutes or so that was just have your jaw drop at the context of the game and how they were performing. You just kind of mentioned there Navarro, like he could have had a hat trick. He was, I think he was the intended target on a cross. Pacius,
he could have had 4 or 5 goals in this game.
Golden chances, he could have had a hat trick like within 20 minutes. Like it was just one of those things where, I mean, that's it. That's really got to be it for their season. Like it's just such a sad way to go. But at the same time, we should talk about Forge being, as Charlie put over chat this weekend, angry Forge, which we love to see. We love to see angry Forge. They were running like crazy.
I want to get to Forge in a second, but before we finish that, does this harm or does this help João Morelli's MVP case?
Oh man.
Right? Because do you guys believe a player can be MVP if they don't make the playoffs? That's one question I think needs to be discussed. And how bad they've been without him, does this help you? I ran some numbers. There you go. Listen to this. So João Morelli has been on the pitch this season for 1,344 minutes. And during that time, Halifax have outscored the opponents 20-18. Okay, so that's pretty good, right?
Not bad,
1,344 minutes.
I know where this is
20
going.
goals, 18 against. He's been off the pitch for 1,050 minutes, and Halifax 7, opponents 15. It's a stark contrast, right? So they've scored. So we all know how valuable he is to Halifax. And he's the Golden Boot winner, and no one's going to beat him now.
No.
He's going to be one of the 3, I think, pretty obviously going to be shortlisted here. But do they not making the playoffs? Or should it even matter in terms of impacting Morelli's MVP case, Marty?
I think it does because I mean we have to put in like I think his last goal would have been late September. In the CPL, right? Obviously out with injury, is kind of fallen out of people's hearts and minds, obviously. But I think he's one of the 3, but he doesn't win it. I think that's a fair compromise considering the season that he's had and the seasons that Halifax has had. I'm not sure, Charlie. What do you think?
What do you think, Charlie?
Yeah, I might agree with Marty here. I don't. I'm not a person who necessarily thinks that you have to make the playoffs to be an MVP.
Okay.
Neither am I.
I think if you're close, if you're in the race, then absolutely all the power to you. I mean, that stat that they've scored 20 goals in his time on the pitch, he's scored 14 of them himself. Yeah. And I think he's assisted a couple of them as well.
Yeah.
So it's inarguable that he's probably he probably is the most valuable player to any CPL team.
Which season. Would mean that he's probably the MVP then.
Which exactly. But
are you saying he's the most valuable player?
I might be talking myself into it live, but to me it feels, I mean, it's not his fault. It's just an unfortunate circumstance that he hasn't been there at this important stage of the season, and just, you know, the narrative won't be right. The story won't be right for it because, you know, it kind of they've gone out with a whimper rather than a bang here.
Right.
You know, him not in the lineup, and they've just kind of folded a little bit, and it's really been unfortunate for Halifax. You know, even I look at the halftime subs. This is a tangent, but the halftime subs they made, all 3 of those guys are immediately involved on their goal, but they're already down 3-0. Yeah. So it's just too little, too late there. But yeah, if Morelli had been around these last couple of games, you do wonder. But I don't know.
It might be different.
It might be. And it's still time, I suppose. If he scores this weekend and they win the game and it keeps them in playoff contention again, going into that final game between York and Forge, then we'll see. But just imagine where Halifax would be without Morelli, though. Just for 1 second. And I think
it's not hard. It's not
bottom of the league, right? And they have had injuries as well, by the way, a ton of them. I feel for Stephen Hart, a ton of injuries at the wrong time as well. Yeah. And Morelli's time being injured right now in October has not come at the right time. To Forge, and we were both there. We were all there for midweek game against CF Montreal that ended in heartache. But you had the feeling, depending on what lineup they were going to play, and I did wonder whether they were going to change a bunch of players ahead of this big week game CONCACAF game this week against Santos de Guapiles on Tuesday night. But in the end, they played a lot of the players. When they didn't score a goal, despite having all the pressure on CF Montreal, it was like they left a bunch of chances. They came out and said, we're just going to score goals now instead. Yeah. And it was almost like the game kicked off immediately after the CF Montreal game. And as you said, angry Forge, like, all right, we can't score against these guys. All right, we'll score against this lot. And sometimes when you leave a little bit behind in one match, Charlie, you can go and get the rest. And thankfully, Halifax helped them a little bit on that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. That game on Wednesday, an emotional night, no doubt. They come in here and they were absolutely on a mission from minute one. They were saying, we are having none of Halifax. We're not having any nonsense. We're scoring immediately and we're getting the business done here very quickly. And then, moving directly onto that Santos game, they've kind of, broken the floodgates after Montreal, so many chances they kind of left on the table there. And they're coming in to this Santos game with a lot more momentum and a lot of really good form. And Forge are just such an incredible team, because you said that they didn't make that many changes, but I look at the team and I at first glance I'm like, yeah, that looks very similar to the team against Montreal, but they had an entirely different front three.
They did, yeah.
And Paulo Sabac started. I mean, that's the thing with Forge, is they're just so deep at the moment.
Yeah, full of, obviously, Ashinoni Johnson, the first game he didn't play in the CPL this season. Kristian was terrific. Samuel was obviously not playing, but they had an opportunity there to change the front three around and not miss a beat. And that's, again, back to our point about in a massive game, like who's their best three going forward? Where does Borges fit in? I thought Sabac did well. And Becker played as a 6. Again, and he's done that. Also, here's another guy you need to talk about as a potential MVP, by the way, as well, because he was absolutely magnificent in this game. Again, I mean, I know he played as a 6 against Halifax. He basically played with a cigar in his mouth around the field. By the way, it was as easy as it comes for him, but it was just brilliant to watch. Again, the spacing and the off the ball movement for Forge and their overall ability to just keep passing and moving is like no other team. And this is where we're at right now, guys, is that they've been playing in all these competitions. They're getting to play in the CONCACAF League. We'll get to that in a second. But now they're 6 points away from 4 games from being the top team, And with everything that's come against them, all they need to do is win 2 of the last 4, Marty. And again, it's got to go through Forge if they're going to win this. Who's going to win this league?
Thinking about watching that game, and you're kind of touching on a little bit of the rotation, but also like a player like Kyle Becker starts. It's like this team is never gassed or tired. And while that is definitely, if you ask Bobby, that's like, oh yeah, that has to do with the depth. But also there's just these players that, like, again, like Kyle Becker, like he just keeps playing and it's exactly. And you think about some of the running, like you kind of touched on the movement there, like in that goal, I think it was the second Navarro goal. The movement between Awua and Chouanier was incredible, and the running was they just didn't stop, right? They just didn't stop, and it was just one of those things you're just watching, being like, how is this a team that had an absolute, for one, just a demoralizing loss to CF Montreal? Like they were the better team, they should have went through, and now you're looking ahead to, again, as Bobby said in the pre-match press conference to this game, their biggest match in club history, no doubt, against Santos, bigger than Montreal. And how do they just keep doing this? I mean, what else are you supposed to say about it? It's just mesmerizing.
Final word then on that game. And by the way, what a week we've got here in the Canadian Premier League. Forge against Santos Guapiles, trying to get through to the Champions League, which is a bigger carrot than semi-final of the CONCACAF League. They can get through to the Champions League next season. That's right, the legit CONCACAF Champions League. And Pacific come to Toronto to play against the TFC in the semi-final of the Canadian Championship as well on Wednesday night. Full coverage on Canadian Premier League.ca, CanPL.ca, and all of our sites and all of our YouTube channel are coming up this week as well on that. So keep posted on that. A word on Forge. It should be said to those who aren't aware, they can get through to the CONCACAF Champions League without progressing through. They are down 3-1 from the first leg. They obviously want to win the game 2-0 and progress, or win the game any way they can. But if they win the game and do not get through, they have a chance here. Basically, there's 6 teams who qualify through the CONCACAF League in 2021 to next year's CONCACAF Champions League, 4 semi-finalists. and 2 losing quarterfinalists. There are only 3 losing quarterfinalists this year because of one team was taken out, and you can check out why. It's hilarious. I'm not going to get into it right now, but go out and check the video or just Google it. And then so basically there's 3 teams playing for these 6 for this 2 spots of losing quarterfinalists, and Forge are in a great spot. If they win the game, I think it's not definite, but it's pretty much clear they should be okay here with the result of the Marathon Motegua game. But Charlie, with all that said, I don't think they'll be thinking about trying to win a game 1-0. They're going into this trying to believe they can win this whole thing and get through to the next stage.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this was the first thing that all of the Forge group were saying after that 3-1 is they just have to win a game 2-0 at home. And if they can't do that, then what are we doing here? We've seen them do that tons of times, right? They just obviously Halifax are several levels below the Santos team at the moment, but Forge can play like that against anybody really, and they're in good form. They've been playing excellent football in the last week, and I think they've definitely got enough in the tank for this night. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be on Tuesday night at Tim Hortons Field, but that might also go in Forge's favor. It's been getting
cold,
a lot colder. It's been getting a lot colder around here in the last couple of weeks. So the closer we get to this second leg, the better I'm feeling.
A balmy 3 degrees.
A balmy 3 degrees. Yeah, that's perfect for Forge. Santos
it's going to be windy though. It's going to be windy
always
for sure.
Windy at Tim Hortons Field.
Of course,
always windy.
Nice little wind chill.
So, yeah. This will be a lot of fun. This will be a lot of fun.
Check out the games live on One Soccer this week, Tuesday night from Tim Hortons Field, a massive occasion. And then Wednesday night, again, another big occasion for the league and for Canadian soccer, a specific take on Toronto FC. That should be special, boys. We'll all be there for that one as well. They came close last week, Forge, to beating CF Montreal, Pacific against TFC. A little bit more of a bigger hill to climb. Certainly because TFC rested a bunch of players when they went to Atlanta this past week in MLS because they know that it's a season-defining game for them. But this is just going to be fun, no? I mean, there's a lot of players out there, Marco Bustos and many others who've been waiting for an opportunity, and probably that is the storyline. No, Marty Bustos, with not getting the chance to play against the Whitecaps, didn't know if he gets his chance against an MLS team this year. He's back, firing and healthy, and great to see me back on the pitch against TFC.
Just kind of touching on it there are multiple players in the specific team that can make the jump to MLS, but he is the one guy. He is the guy for one, but he's also the guy that didn't get his opportunity against the Whitecaps. I'm thinking he's going to have a big game. I'm thinking he's going to have a big game. Pacific.
How we got angry Forge? We got angry Forge this weekend.
Oh,
we might get angry Pacific on Wednesday.
Pissed Pacific for sure.
I really hope so. There you
go. We need a response, no doubt. It's a massive challenge, no doubt about it. I think my colleague Gareth Wheeler, who said impossible for York to go to TFC, is calling another impossible for Pacific at TFC. So we'll see whether he's right on that. But yeah, we'll see. It'd be good. It'd be fun. We're looking forward to it. Our time is up. We can't thank you enough for spending 43 minutes plus with us, and we appreciate your love for the Canadian Premier League and for all the games. Have a good week, everybody. And as I said, more coverage all across these big games this week, CanPL.ca and on our YouTube channel. Enjoy the games as usual. Take care of each other, and we'll speak